Of course, turnover is a priority. I don't think you can trade on the fact that because it appears that there's fewer jobs, even though that's not true, that you can somehow take more of an advantage of your employees.
Welcome to Vibe Check, a place where we have open, honest, and authentic conversations about the human side of business. Our goal is to help you achieve better business outcomes with people-led initiatives. And to get there, there's only room for real talk and genuine advice. No sugarcoating here. I'm JJ, Office Vibe's resident employee experience researcher and your host for this series. Let's get right into it. So our guest today is Matt McFarlane. Matt, welcome to Vibe Check.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So as a means of introduction, Matt is the director of people experience at Oyster HR, a global employment platform that makes it possible for companies everywhere around the world to hire quickly and compliantly talent, basically from anywhere. Matt is experienced working across complex, globally distributed environments, and he's really passionate about building first-rate workplaces and cultures based on a foundation of people centricity and operational excellence. Woo! Reputation precedes you. Matt, I always like to start the episodes by asking who you are first as a person. Tell us a bit about Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Who am I as a person? So I'm a father to a fur baby. So I have my dog Delilah, who's 15 years old, and so of course she's asleep at the moment. I'm a partner to my partner Kathleen, who's a business owner locally. Yeah, that's that. I'm someone who enjoys food, traveling, all of those sorts of things, all the good things in life.
Wow, amazing. I love it. And professionally speaking, how would you describe yourself?
Oh, definitely someone who is really committed to, like, I guess, the operationalization of a great employee experience. A lot of my career and focus and emphasis has been implementing what is, the explosion of technology and incredible capabilities out there, and leveraging those to improve the employee experience for employees, for managers, for ourselves, so that we can get to really where I see the value add is in workplaces between managers and employees, and a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about today, and just really enabling those. So yeah, that would be one aspect of it, I would say.
And what would you say is a core value you live by, both personally and professionally? Because it's often not the case that those are not the same, right? They're highly connected. What would you say drives you as a core value?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I always like to lead into the sort of first thing that comes to mind, and I feel like this is a value that gets used generically a lot by companies, but I think integrity is a really big part of every people function. It's certainly something that I hold really near and dear. And again, I know we're going to talk about the theme of trust in a lot of today's conversation. So, for me, that's something that's so core and critical to the role that we play within HR and people function. So yeah, I think for me, that's a big one.
Wow, that's a great preview. You just got me so excited. I want to jump to that topic already. I agree, and it's probably something that we both have a lot in common. I fully agree what you said. When you don't have trust, everything else just doesn't work, right? It's the foundation
Absolutely.
for life and any type of relationship. I agree. Well, thank you for the intro. I feel I know you much better, and I hope our audience will agree and feel the same. So we do this for all of our episodes. We open and close with the same question. So before we dive into our very promising and exciting subject, I want to ask you for a quick vibe check. So my question is, how are you doing? Really?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do a similar thing in our team meetings, so it's a concept I'm familiar with. Yeah, we really value it. We call them snappies, and so generally we get everyone to choose a number. So I would say, like, I'm probably like a 7 or an 8. Why is that? We're going through our Oyster second ever compensation and promotion review cycle. So we've done this once before. We learned a lot of exciting lessons, and we're implementing that a second time round. But I don't think in any company, no matter how young or old, excuse me, how young or old that company is, the compensation and promotion cycle is always, it's an intense time. There's a lot, riding on it. It really strikes at the core kind of part of the EVP in terms of employees and why they come to work. And so I think that pressure is very much felt by us. It's felt by managers. It's felt by a lot of people. And of course, it's an expectation that we want to meet. So yeah, it's a busy time, but I'm doing well. I think I have a phenomenal team who have made this much lighter work than I have had in other places. So I'm excited for the outcome.
Wow. So you said second time you're doing this? They say
The second time.
third time's a charm.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully second time's the charm and we can disprove that. But
Hopefully,
yeah,
but
no, it'll only. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine if the leaps and bounds we've made since the first one to the second one are huge. So I can only imagine what the third one's going to look like. So I'm excited for that future.
And that's my point. Every time we do it, we get better at it, especially when we have a learning and growth mindset about it and saying, like, we're all in this together. And you said it, relying on your colleagues and having a great team to work on, to work on this with makes a complete difference, right? It makes the experience what it should be, a learning experience. But you're right. It's a really stressful time and it's pressure induced for everyone involved. You said it, for HR, for different reasons than it is for managers, but also for employees. This is a key part of your EVP, like you said. And yeah, I think we've all gone through this personally as employees. We all know what it feels like. And I feel it's good to know that team members in HR and people ops team say this out loud and acknowledge the fact that it's a stressful period. And the reason why that stress is there is because we want to do it right. We want to do right for and by our people,
Yeah, precisely. I think that's at the core of it. Is we want to do a good job, and there's a lot of it's the kind of I don't know what the word is, but the convergence of a lot of requirements as the business drivers, as again the managers and what they're looking for as individuals, and so it's trying to find the path that suits all of those outcomes and navigating that. So you're right, it is because ultimately we want to do a great job. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so thank you for this vibe check. I'll see you at the end of the episode to see how you feel and how that's evolved. I hope it will be a positive one. I have to say, I love the tone that the birds in the background are giving to this conversation. I don't know how it's making you feel. It makes me feel very mellow and very zen. How about you?
I'm glad to hear. Yeah, I'm in Brisbane, so I'm in a subtropical area. I'm in a very green part of Brisbane. So yeah, it's great, except that in the mornings when we're in summer and it's 4 a.m. sunrise, they like to make sure that you're awake. So there is that, but well, otherwise they're lovely.
There are pros and cons to everything. So here it's completely different parts of the world. The audience doesn't know this. Obviously, you said you're in Brisbane. I'm in Montreal. The sun is setting. Sun is rising for you the next day. And I feel it's so great to experience both at the same time. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
All right, let's dive into it. So we're talking about turnover. We're going to talk about trust, and we're going to talk about how managers impact turnover. But I'd love to start with what I call the T word. We have to talk about it, turnover. I'd love to hear your thoughts. There's no hiding. We're in a sensitive economic climate right now, and it's different for different places in the world and different industries. Some are more impacted by than others. I wonder, what's your take on this? Do you feel that turnover is still the priority of all priorities for people ops teams?
Yeah, I mean, short answer, yes. I think just because of the environment and the way it's shifting, it doesn't mean that teams, from my perspective, should be taking their foot off the pedal in terms of their focus on something that still ultimately has a very real commercial impact on the business. I mean, when we're talking about turnover, we're talking about someone who for probably some time has been thinking about leaving. They're probably not doing their best at their job. When they do leave, you're now piling that pressure of their absent role on others. You're then having to go through the cost and effort of replacing. There's the onboarding. So I think no matter where we are in whatever economic economy we're in, it would be prudent to just always have that as a focus for your team and your company.
Yeah, it's always on the dashboard, right?
Absolutely,
I always have this image of like an HR team piloting a plane. Basically, it's like the one thing you always want to have on your radar, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, if I mentioned at the start of this conversation that I love talking about the environment and things like that. Like, I think reading between the lines of the question, I think there's certainly a possibility, and I think we've seen this with the shift of companies forcing people in some respects back to the office, and from my perspective, really reducing in some aspects that employee experience. I don't think that the environment being challenging for companies can't be a reason for them to revise what that EVP looks like. But I think it really needs to be done as a partnership with your employees. So what I mean by that is, if your company is going through times because of the environment we're in, of course, turnover is a priority. I don't think you can trade on the fact that because it appears that there's fewer jobs, even though that's not true. Um, that you can somehow take more of an advantage of your employees. I think, just because things may not be going well commercially, it doesn't mean that you can't alter or reduce costs in some space. But I think that has to be done really in partnership with your team, and understanding where some of those costs are not having the impact that you're looking for, and being really transparent with them. Hey, we can make this change, or something's got to give somewhere else. Like, how can we work together in unison to really see the company through this struggling time?
Mm. You touched my heart there, and a very core value of mine. I'm a firm believer in valuing the uniqueness in each individual, equally a fan of the power of collectivity. And I feel there's a saying, I probably said this in all of the episodes, but alone you go fast, together you go further. And what you spoke to there in your answer is really so true. So true. It resonates so much with me in the fact that this is a relationship. We're in this together. You would never consider your relationship with your child or a friend or any loved one or your partner as someone being not the other person's equal, right? Why would it
Yeah.
be ever different at work?
Mm,
And there's so much power when you unleash that collectivity, and so many
absolutely.
great ideas. Yeah. Would you, I mean, you spoke to this a little, but would you even go as far as saying that there could be a second wave or a new wave of the Great Resignation that we saw, in the
Yeah.
short term? Do you think that's foreseeable?
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible. And I guess I would caveat my answer by saying that, the Great Resignation was this thing that was kind of largely confined to more like, wealthy developed nations economies, and I don't think we really saw that phenomenon necessarily in other countries. But
Right.
if I speak to that environment, I mean, we've got this influx of people into the workforce that are Gen Z. I think you already have millennials being the dominant kind of workforce
Oh,
in
yeah.
in these economies. They're very, I'm a millennial, very principled, a lot of ideals, a lot of expectation around companies. And this is where things like values and mission and vision have become so critical for organizations, because people don't just want to come in and clock in and do their 9 to 5. They want to make sure that they're actually having an impact on the world. And so I think you're seeing that workforce and those expectations grow in number. But I think, again, yes, we're seeing this highly publicized layoff event within the technology industry, but it's a sliver of the world's economy. And there are so many other organizations who, by virtue of the fact that tech is coming down off what was a sugar high of the economy of money, um, and it's actually made this talent accessible to them. So you've got banking institutions, or you've got professional services organizations who couldn't maybe pay the massively inflated salaries that tech were offering, who have now got access to this talent. So in saying that, there's still opportunity everywhere, and these people are all very highly skilled, highly qualified people. So yeah, this confluence of things, I think you will continue to see inflated levels of turnover. I think where you've got organizations that don't take this stuff seriously. So if you don't take the leadership responsibility seriously, if you don't take the values and the vision and the impact of your organization seriously, if you don't help emphasize those things to your employees and treat them right and treat them how they expected, then there are still plenty of opportunities, and they will absolutely go and take it. I mean, average tenure is in free fall. People don't spend their life at one company anymore. That's a given. So yeah, in short, I think the threshold for people to go and take on another job will continue to stay low, and I think that opportunity is still there. So yeah, together I think we'll still see a lot of that movement.
Yeah, I love your take on this. Very educated one, might I add. And I agree with what you said. Like they say, the times they are changing. I mean, never has this been more true than now. And what we see is a constant need to look at and reevaluate our EVP. We've been using the acronym, by the way, for those who don't know. EVP is Employee Value Proposition, just to be sure it's accessible to everyone in the audience. But never has there been a more constant need to look at that EVP and adjust based on those expectations that are changing. The climate, the environment, everything around us is moving so quickly. And sometimes it feels like a roller coaster for sure, for many business owners, I'm sure. But yeah, it's a time to keep your eye out on those really critical things, because employees make your organization at the
Yeah,
end of the day, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
No employees, no nothing. Tell me, from your point of view at Oyster, you've been around for a while. You've been with Oyster for a while too. Any particular programs that you've put in place with your team that come to mind that you've seen has had really a good impact on retention?
Hmm. Uh, there's a couple that come to mind. I mean, I would preface it by saying that Oyster, we're a young company. Fortunately for us, we haven't really had a lot of turnover, so that's a phenomenal position to be in. So I would say what that means is that a lot of the programs that we are delivering are really more preventative. So they're very much more around, okay, how are we understanding from our teams what they're looking for? What are the things that we're able to do and put in place that are actually going to prevent them getting to the point of going, actually, do I really want to be here anymore? And I think, again, that really should be the tempo of companies anyway. By the time someone's doing an exit survey, it's too late, right? You're not going to get, you're very unlikely to get them back, and are you really getting them back in an engaged way? So, but to the specifics in terms of programs, yeah. So, one thing that I can think of that was really, really core and pivotal to our organization. One of our values is about building trust. We are an organization that is 600 people in 70 countries, so we're incredibly diverse. And a really early topic that people were seeking clarity and seeking understanding in was around our pay practices. Why do we pay what we pay? How do we pay fairly? How is all of that established? And so we had a massive journey in front of us anyway, just trying to work that out for ourselves as we were scaling so rapidly.
Right.
But that was one thing that it took us. Admittedly, it took us a long time to get right, but to the point now where we've released a tool internally that for any Oyster in the business, they can look at any role in any part of the business in any country in the world and know what we aspire to pay in that area. And for us, that was a massive program deliverable for us to be able to establish that trust so that, everyone knew their value within the organization. And now, as I mentioned, there's that pressure of comp and promo time. Now it's about, it's actually, staying true to that as well. So that's one thing where, again, transparency is extraordinarily high. I think across that expectation as a virtue is high across companies and workforces anyway, and that's where we've tried to kind of beat expectations and just be really upfront about what that compensation journey looks like for Oysters.
Wow, I feel this will resonate and spark so much interest for the people listening. Can you share a little bit, sort of some of the pitfalls in going through such a process as the one that you described? What are things like you wish you knew going in?
Yeah, I mean, a thousand pitfalls. What are the things that I wish I knew going in? Um,
Or advice, maybe, if it's a more
yeah,
positive way of putting the idea.
just it's I think you have to be prepared to really back it up once you've launched it. It's I would say we spent a lot of time building this tool, and again, my team are incredible, and we've delivered something that is so unique for us. But it's pay is such a complex topic, even if you're in one country, let alone 70. You get so many questions, and I joke with my team sometimes that I think we should get honorary degrees in economics, because when it comes to the environment we're in, we're dealing with rampant inflation in some countries. We're dealing with currency fluctuations in others. We're dealing with the market salaries going all over the shop. So you've got this confluence of these incredible economic factors, and you're trying to help your workforce understand and navigate that whilst also being true to the business and partnering very closely with finance. I don't think we could spend a week honestly covering the learnings that I've taken from this.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I would say is like make the space and dedicate the time to helping your people understand what it is that you're putting out there. So we created a Slack channel that was dedicated to any questions. We created copious documentation on our Notion pages around how does this work? How did we develop it? What's the mechanics behind the tool for people that are really interested and that way inclined? FAQs, anything we can. And it is overwhelming at first glance, but I think the fact that people have that resource, and again, hitting on that transparency piece around this is no holds barred, like this is commercially sensitive in a lot of ways because we want to try and turn it into a part of our product. But here it is for you on a platter, and we want you to understand it so that you recognize that we've tried to be as genuine to the company and the philosophy that we're establishing for compensation. Ask us anything. And I think just making the time, I think a lot of people have appreciated the support and the level of involvement we've had from all members of our HR team to be able to support it as it's gone live. But that would be one fraction of the learnings that we've had on this journey, without a doubt.
We can't, I agree. We can't underestimate the power of giving information and then communicating around that information, giving a safe space to your employees and multiple channels in which they can consume the information based on the type of profile they are. Are they like, give me the high level details, or no, I want to know everything. You have to cater to these different types of personalities and learning styles and allow that exchange and consumption of information to actually happen. Wow, that's admirable. Like such a wonderful journey. So thank you for sharing a little portion of those learnings. In your experience professionally, like either at Oyster or anywhere else you've worked or anything else you've seen in your life, have you seen any examples of organizations really taking a massive operational hit because of turnover? Yeah, you can share a story.
Sadly, a couple of times. Yeah. So the one really pronounced example that comes to mind was a professional services organization that I worked for. So, time and materials kind of billable staff were a really core or were a cornerstone to revenue generation. As with most services organizations, when you join the company, your onboarding, your productivity or your billable hours are stepped up over several months. Very common practice. No one comes in day one delivering 100% of their role, of course. So where you can see I'm probably going to is that with this company, their billable staff had a turnover of something like 30 or 40%. It's going back a few years. So like it was monumentally bad. And given that staged step up in productivity, it was incredibly easy to go, okay, well, we've got all of these people exiting the business at about month, whatever it was, 5 or 6. So you've got people continuously coming in the door, only delivering, 20% in month 1 and 30 or 40% in month 2, etc. You've got this massive gap where you're not actually ever reaping the full benefit of those people's productivity. And I mean, this didn't even, some of these stats that we were feeding back to the business didn't even begin to include things like the cost to replace these people. Again, that impact or reduced, I guess, billable hours on the rest of the team. Like it was such a linear, we're here and this is what the cost is equation. That it was really impactful. But yeah, it's that's one way in which it's easy to tie a very tangible financial impact. But I mean, ultimately, everyone's in roles like that where that value is equally as kind of as important to the business. And so I think if you apply a similar practice, where if you're seeing people exit the business after 6 months or 12 months, or that turnover rate's really high, you've got a lot of people who are ramping up the loss of knowledge, the time it takes to build that awareness, where it's a handicap on your business.
It is. It's a hit on your culture. It's a hit on your business outcomes, on your customers, on everything that the business touches, basically. I agree.
Yeah.
Woo! Um, do
Hitting all the
you,
top ones, all the deep
yeah,
topics.
those are tough topics. It's okay. Yeah, I agree. But we have to talk about it. That's what Vibe Check is about. It's real talk, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
mm, agreed. Well, thank you for all of that. I feel it sets the table for what's to come, I guess, in the rest of the conversation. So we know from our research on the science of employee engagement that trust, a word we've used multiple times already in our conversation, trust is at the very core of what both creates and maintains high levels of employee engagement, right?
Mm.
We know also that an engaged employee is very less likely to leave than a disengaged one. So, yeah, let's deep dive on trust. Are you up for it?
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. So, I guess I'll start with like more of a personal question a little bit. From your point of view, would you say that trust is earned or given by default?
Yeah, this is such a I would say it's such a personal question. You it depends so much on your
On who you are.
experience and your history, yeah, who you are as a person and the
Mm,
experiences you've had. So I would start there by saying that not everyone is equipped to come into a new organization or act in a way that is trusting of others by default. And then
yeah,
conversely, you've had people who have had phenomenal experiences and they come in trusting immediately, which is fantastic. Um, so yeah, I think it's a real spectrum, and I think there's probably no generic answer for or one size fits all answer.
I agree, but I think that's the perfect answer is you can't assume that everyone views this the
Mm,
same. And so the best thing you can possibly do, whatever relationship we're looking at, like the employee with the entire organization, with your manager, whatever relationship you're looking at, is to ask first, what's your take on this? How do you go about it? And some of the greatest managers I've seen have asked this question as part of their very first questions or meetings or one-on-ones they have with their new employees. What's your philosophy on this? What has been your experience? And just in asking that question, it's just so powerful because the door it opens when you do. People start sharing
yeah.
their experiences, what's been a great one, what's been a not great one. And you just, I think it's a great way to establish trust. It sounds funny, eh? You're asking a question about trust, but then what you're really building is trust.
Yeah, and I think that's spot on. And I think the only way I'd complement that is that, of course, again, depending on the experience of others, is that where that trust has been really damaged in the past for previous experiences, is that hand in hand with that, hand in hand with flagging your interest in building trust, I think just comes patience. Not everyone can go, oh, JJ, thanks for saying that we want to have a trusting relationship. Cool, I'll trust you immediately. It doesn't work that way. It's very
No,
much a case of you know, uh, of actions over words. And I think the more you continue to show that that is valued and sought after from whether that's the manager to the employee or whatever, the more it indicates to the individual that maybe it is a safe space to begin to start trusting and sharing vulnerabilities or whatever it might be that are getting in the way of work.
I agreed. It's a process. Basically, it takes time. You're
Mm.
absolutely right. Patience is a great addition to what was said previously. I agree. And shoot, I forgot my thought. I had something that popped into my head as you were talking, but that's fine. We'll come back to it later, I'm sure. In your personal way of doing things, how do you go about building trust with your own manager, you
Mm.
yourself?
Yeah, good question. So Uh, when I think of trust, the things that come to mind are, words like accuracy and reliability. I think as well as that again, like patience, hand in hand with it, is that you have to care about the individual. I don't think you can just care generally about people. You have to care about the individual you're trying to build the relationship with as well. And so for me, with any new relationship, you start to demonstrate or actions, I guess, against some of those pillars. But it's getting really clear as well on when we talk about accuracy and reliability when it comes to the work and the expectations of the role, you have to be really tuned in with your manager around what that looks like. And so for me, that was a real starting place. What are you expecting from me in this role? I mean, it's nice to have the position description, but how often have people seen that vary from or no position description in some cases? So getting really, really tuned in on, okay, what's my left and right of arc? Where am I expected to focus my time and energy, and what kind of outcomes are you expecting to see? And then from there is where the dialogue can start around, okay, here's how I'm delivering on that, or here's what I feel like I need, which, touches a lot on the vulnerability piece,
Yes.
to be able to deliver on this role. So that for me was yeah, really a starting point.
Agreed. And it came back to me. What I was thinking as you were talking was actions speak louder than the words. And it takes time, obviously. You can come into that relationship and say all of these beautiful things, but then in time,
Mm,
people will remember what you did. They'll notice your actions, right? And they'll speak much louder than your words. So
absolutely.
you're right. And I love the piece that you throw in there and really basically constantly provoking that alignment. Like, what are your expectations? What are mine? And am I still on target with those? Have they changed as the role evolves and the company context this changes?
Mm,
We have to strive for that constant alignment. And I think doing that helps build trust, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And then okay, on a less personal level, how would you go about building a culture of trust between you and the managers at your organizations as a member of the people ops
Mm.
team?
Yeah, I think it's taking some of those tenets that I mentioned. So, reliability and accuracy, and just, I guess, zooming out a bit, something that I'm really conscious of is, what are the expectations that we have of managers, and what are the expectations that managers have of us? And I think, again, almost creating a menu of, here in people experience, here are the things that we focus on. There might be things, that are in that you need our help with, and that's where, using those same practices we just discussed, you can start to build a trusting relationship. But there's this thing with HR or people as a profession, where we tend to sometimes become the catch-all for everything. So it's very easy for a lot of people, employees, managers, whoever, to think that something, falls within our remit when it may not. And I don't have a ready example, but I'm sure, finance sometimes is stuff where it's like, what? But yeah, I think just getting really clear and helping people understand. But when something doesn't sit with us, it's helping them understand where it does, and redirecting that, back that way as well. But at Oyster, this is something that we take really seriously. We have Adeji, someone in my team who is dedicated towards manager enablement. How is he out there partnering with leaders to make sure that they have the support that they need when it comes to that relationship with their
Mhm.
employees, and that they feel like they're getting the most from it? We have a number of different other channels through which we service both managers and employees. That again, the reliability and the accuracy just continues to build trust. I think within the business between ourselves and the managers.
Hmm, agreed. Can't help but think about how, Office Vibe is a platform that measures employee engagement. And one of the core metrics in there is the relationship with your manager. And the sub metric, sub driver that drives that the most is trust with the manager. And I can't help but think of so many examples I've seen in my career of trust being broken.
Mm.
Um, What's your take on this? Do you think that when trust between a manager and employees or an employee is broken, do you think we can fix that and bring it back?
Yeah, I mean, just like trust itself, I think it really just depends, I guess, on the severity of the
The
breaking.
breakage. Yeah.
Yeah, the breakage is the right word. I guess that, another thing that is really critical to trust is communication. I think so often issues materialize because of poor communication, and I think they
Yes.
can quite often be resolved just by, picking up the phone or getting on a call with somebody and just saying, hey, I didn't realize that this may have upset you, or something. Here's really where I was coming from. And I think just that realignment so often is, for 99% of the issues that I see at work, it can resolve it. um, the more serious ones, without a doubt, looking for support through a team like ours to be able to facilitate an outcome that meets both parties' expectations is critical. But, really core to those serious ones is actually the desire to want to repair that trust as well. Is it, beyond repair, and we've got to look at very different outcomes, or is it a case of, yes, this thing has matured and gotten out of hand in some respects. But did we both intend on this? Do we both want to see an outcome where we are, trusting again? And I think that's the first step to then, move towards, okay, well, what can we do to try and repair that as well?
Yeah, that's a key part. What's the commitment to fix it? That'll be a determining factor, right? If the answer is no, I'm not committed on either side,
Yeah,
No chance to recover, of course. It all
that's
it
it.
all starts with that, and you have to build on that too, I feel. I agree with you with communication being so central, to that trust actually working. Thank you for tying that back so beautifully together. Awesome. And then as we have navigated through the topic of turnover, I'm wondering what's your opinion on the responsibilities that fall onto people ops team in equipping managers to act on employee turnover, because we'll talk about that in a second. We'll really zoom in on manager impact on turnover. What do you feel is the role of HR team members in equipping those managers in working and acting on employee turnover? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So what do I? So me personally, what do I think our role is? A really core part of it is that I think we are the holders of a lot of people data. We have mountains of it, and I think helping make sense of that and surfacing where there is either whether it's a lead indicator or it's a case of, oh hey, we've just realized you've got really high turnover. We are in a lot of ways the holders of that information, and helping make that digestible, accessible for managers is really a core critical component, I would say. And then I guess beyond there, it's really the tools to help equip people with to do something about it. I mean,
Mm,
me as a manager, if it somehow ever went unnoticed, if you were to come to me and say, hey, you've got really high turnover in your team that is very different compared to the rest of the organization, firstly, I'd be mortified. If I somehow was unaware. But second, I would want to know, okay, what can I do to fix it? What's the data telling us is some of the reasons. I mean,
right, right.
again, when you're in this position, you're probably not as in touch with your team as you should be anyway. But really, that's where I guess you've got to start. And to complement that is we can't always rely on surveys. And I think this comes to another aspect that we have to work to equip managers with, is that you've got to have an ongoing relationship with your team. You have to have that trust. You have to have that constant check-in, and whether it's purely social or from a welfare perspective. But if you have an active dialogue with them, that's where you're going to be fed back some of these concerns that are resulting in the turnover as well. And so whilst surveys are a great fantastic scalable way to capture some of those insights. Ultimately, it doesn't replace what needs to be a conversation, and needs to be ongoing engagement between the manager and their employee.
Constant communication. You're right. If you never have one-on-ones, if you never have what formal or not, just check-ins with your team and taking that pulse. I call it the human side, the human version of the survey. If you don't have that,
Yeah.
so you talked about surveys being one of the tools, obviously, to be able to measure the impact that managers have on turnover. Can you think of anything else, or do you want to add anything else that you've seen as a best practice? Like any metrics that are specifically interesting to look at, or specific behaviors to spot, maybe?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Hmm.
Outside of surveys, I mean, I guess just one thing as well as we've been, as a business, because we've scaled so quickly, and because the nature of such a complex workforce, and the queries and questions that have come through with that have been so, they've grown enormously. So the responsibility to be able to handle those and process those questions was a really key priority for us early on. And so we implemented a service desk, so something that would help us handle those sorts of things. But I think in some respects, it almost got in the way of the ability for people just to have a conversation and not make it a ticket and make it feel transactional. So one other avenue, I guess, is that just knowing that, and this is a hard thing to achieve, by the way, because I guess HR as a brand is not great. It's something that sadly, predominantly in a lot of companies, people have bad experiences, and so it's our job to try and overturn that. But I think making ourselves a safe space for people to come to if they do find that actually they are really struggling with some of those manager behaviors and they need some support in helping navigate that. We do a lot in the way of helping people understand how to give feedback. And whether we provide training or we provide case studies or documentation around models people can use and things like that, but then actually putting it into practice is the next challenge that I guess we're focused on trying to help people with.
Yes, I love that you brought this up. I was hoping you would talk about it. Um, I think I agree with you. It's really what you're mentioning there is really enabling people with the tools and coachings they need to have those tough conversations, but also being able to actually raise the flag and say there's an issue here. Like there's so many places where it feels unsafe
Yeah,
or uncomfortable to go to HR and bring those things, but it's part of one of the roles of the function, so importantly, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So Matt, we talked a lot about, the impact that managers and that relationship we as employees have with our managers can have on our levels of engagement, which leads to turnover. Everything's connected. Everything's in everything, as we say at Office 5. Um, what would you do? What would be your course of action if obviously all the evidence was there? There's high turnover, specifically in one manager's team. The manager's behavior or leadership style is at cause. What would be your sequence of steps in addressing that?
Hmm. I think that the first thing to focus on is awareness. I mentioned earlier, if someone were to come to me and say, hey, as the people experience team, we're here to help and support and enable great leadership. And based on the data that we are capturing and some of the inputs that we are getting, we're recognizing a few flags that are either causing or a cause for turnover. um, that has to be the first step is that awareness.
Awareness.
Again, it's so easy to get caught up in the day to day of what's going on. I think it's there's a lot riding on managers' shoulders, is what I'd say. So
Oh,
I think
yes.
it's fair to give them a little bit of bandwidth and maybe not being fully tuned in all the time to some of these happenings. That being said, the expectation from my perspective and the responsibility is absolutely on their shoulders when it comes to resolving it. And so for me, I think it's starting there. Hey, we're recognizing these things. Have you been checking your people? How are you finding, they're responding to some of these queries that you might be raising with them or the conversations you're having? And again, 9 times out of 10, that's probably enough to start seeing some turnaround. Now, of course, there's extreme cases where sadly a lot of people don't see the value of leadership or think that the responsibility of leadership is very different from what we think. And so that's where I guess it's on us and it's on that person's manager to help reestablish the expectation. A great example, we use, performance appraisal tool like most companies. That is an expectation of managers to participate and help enable their team through that. I think people who go 6 months or 12 months without having had a performance conversation, it's not on. And the expectation and a core responsibility of a manager is to be able to help enable them through those sorts of stages. And so I think, yeah, there's varying different ways in which we could escalate. From there, I think we would really lean heavily again on that person's manager to help reestablish what that expectation is. But ultimately, that's where they can demonstrate, or talk to some of the impacts that's having on the business more broadly, or the performance of the team, and so on from there. So
Yeah.
there's myriad ways we could tackle it. But yeah, I think talking about it and raising it initially is the first step.
Yeah. If I can allow to summarize such a complex situation in like 3 steps, I would say first awareness, second investigation, really looking at the practices,
Mm,
the leadership, and then that's where HR comes in, coaching, enabling
yeah,
that manager with the right resources, with the right mindset shift, the right practices, the right rituals, and the right way of opening up the hood and really having
yeah.
the power. Yeah,
I think you just
really.
have to be curious, right? Like, if this
You
becomes a flag, like what, let's understand it and then let's resolve it.
absolutely. And then either it gets resolved or, the situation addresses itself. Maybe that person is not in the
Yeah,
right role or they're not in the right company or expectations don't match. There's a lack of alignment, basically.
yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so, so much for everything. For me, this was a delightful conversation. I hope it was the same for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And we have to follow with tradition. I have to ask you, now that we're done, a final vibe check. How are you doing, really?
Yeah, really good. Good. It's getting. I've got the day ahead of me. I love talking about this stuff because I think it just always brings us back to the baseline of what our expectations are as an organization. So, or as an individual. So yeah, it was a great chat, and I appreciate the time.
Perfect. But you have to go with the same method you did earlier with your,
Oh,
what
I've
do
got
you
to choose a
call it?
number.
Stacking. You're stacking.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say I'm in the like 8 to 9. I think this has been a good chat.
An improvement. As someone who likes to track data, I'm happy. Improvements. Yes.
There we go. We're trending up.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so, so much on behalf of myself and the entire team. And I'm sure everyone listening to this episode, thank you for sharing all your amazing experience and insights and for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.